What if you can go from a business idea to a working MVP in just 2 to 3 weeks, or even 2 to 3 days, all without hiring developers or paying six figures? In today's video, we explore the concept of vibe coding, where you're building applications using natural language and AI. We discuss benefits, limitations, and what it means for your business today and in the future. Welcome to the AI Accelerator for Business show, where you get the latest strategies, tactics, and information about the business benefits of artificial intelligence. My name is Carl Ye, and I'm joined by my co-host Jeff Bradshaw. And today we're talking about something that has been gaining steam across AI with pretty big business implications, and that's the term vibe coding. So for those who aren't following AI news regularly, I'm going to play a small little video here about what vibe coding is.
What is vibe coding? It's a new way of coding where you don't write a single line of code. You use your voice, you tell AI exactly what you want built, and it builds it for you. And it's not just for non-technical people. The smartest minds in AI, Andrej Karpathy, uses it and loves it. And now I do too. Let me tell you what my stack is. So right now I'm using Windsurf as my code editor, but you can use Cursor. I'm using Super Whisper as voice to text, and I simply tell it what I want built. Build me the Tetris game in Python. And I just hit enter and it goes off and does it. Now, here's the key. Vibe coding means you do not read the code. You simply try to use it, see if it works. If it doesn't, you explain what's wrong. You explain what you want built. And if there's an error, you copy paste the error directly into it. You do not look at the diffs, and you basically just vibe. And you trust AI to build what you want. So are you going to vibe code? Let me know in the comments.
That's what vibe coding is, and I think there's a lot of potential implications there where people may go straight into, oh, I can build my own software in a business setting. Oh, I can build the software that can solve this problem. I do think we have to think about managing some expectations, because it sounded from just that video and hundreds of videos like it that literally we can just use our voice and build anything we want. But I think if you haven't had experience with coding, programming, being a software engineer, doing some of that stuff, it's not as straightforward as you think it is. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, and I think that's the thing, Carl. I mean, I've heard vibe coding, and I mean, I'm not a coder. I understand the very, very basics of it. But I've always questioned the fact that I'm like, wait a minute, it's not that easy that I can just tell it what to do and then all of a sudden it's going to show up on a server and I can go public with it. And I think that's, like you say, managing those expectations. But that said, I also think there's huge potential for people to accelerate the coding process so that you can get something that is legible and functionable, and you can get it down a path that gets you much closer, where you can then bring the real brains and the technical people in at the later stages to actually do the testing and really solidify what you've created.
I think too, that's really where we kind of are at with it, right? Like in a bit, you'll show a potential use case for vibe coding, but also things like backend security, unstable logins. When you start scaling these things from a business setting, I think that's where our focus is. You have to understand some of the things that an experienced software engineer actually provides versus you. If you don't have a background in this at all, you may not see certain things, the way that you've implemented it. One example that I really like is, we're both not surgeons, right? But if we go to an AI and be like, hey, how do I perform shoulder surgery? It'll give you a breakdown of what you could potentially do. Let's take, my brother recently had shoulder surgery for microfractures in his shoulder, right? So let's say the most common way to start a shoulder surgery, and again, we know nothing about it, could be, let's say, a vertical incision somewhere on the shoulder. If that's the most common way, because the large language model, most common way, predicting next word, let's start there. But because it's a microfracture and only experienced surgeons, doctors would know this, you don't start with a vertical, because if you do, all these issues will compound. Or you can do it, but it'll just add 4 or 5 more hours to the surgery because you did it the opposite way. Versus a horizontal incision at a certain place, that's actually how you start it. Take that example and move it to coding. yes, you could build this application this way, how you've implemented, but is it the most optimal? Is it down the road when you want to attach different components to it, different features? Will it make the actual application much harder to change and make it adapt to certain things?
I mean, I got to think there's got to be millions of coders around the world rolling their eyes at the whole vibe coding thing, because it's just kind of like, sure, go for it. I compare it, your surgeon example is great. I compare it to a chef. I can go to the store and buy the same piece of meat and the same ingredients that a Michelin 5-star chef can get. I can do it. The output is going to be completely different. And I think that's the thing that people have to realize with vibe coding is it absolutely, I mean, it does. And trust me, it's incredibly powerful. It's very, very exciting. I think it's going to open up a whole new world of opportunities. And I think it's only going to get better. We always say today is the worst AI ever going to be. So I think it'll get better and it'll move even more advanced so that you can get closer to what you actually want for the output. But I still think that, especially today, there is a need for somebody to have a senior developer take a look in and provide some guidance. But that said, we've seen lots of examples where you even done it in meetings, Carl, where we're sitting talking to a client and they're talking about a certain problem and you're developing out a solution and writing some code while we're in the meeting and saying, you mean something like this? That's where I find it incredibly powerful.
And I think that's where when you think about vibe coding, I think of it more as the amount of time you would have to spend with a developer going back and forth, right? It's like, I want this is my concept, show me. And then they show you 3 different examples and you don't like any of them. So you have to keep going back and forth. And all of that time, they're charging you. What if you could get the initial functionality somewhat there? Not perfect, but you take that initial concept, then give it to the developer and be like, this is kind of where I'm going with. You've 10 to 40% improved the productivity of that, so you don't have to pay. You will, in my opinion, if you're thinking anything for business, I would highly recommend you still go to a developer, whether you vibe coded it to 90%. Have that person check the code, have that person check security, your database, your logins, because the last thing you want to do is implement something that is kind of okay, but then when you scale it, it's now vulnerable to whatever security hacks, vulnerable, or it just starts getting really buggy because you didn't take into consideration things that an experienced developer would have taken into consideration.
But I think the opportunity, and as an example we had, is a client that said that they pay, I don't know what it was, $25,000 a year for a license to a certain safety program that's pretty basic, but they don't have any other alternative. And that's an example of one where they say it's good, but it's not great. If it did this, this, and this, it would be awesome. Well, now you could potentially vibe code something to get it to maybe closer to 95% accuracy of what they want, take it to a developer, finish it off. And I don't know, maybe you can do that for 10 grand and it's a one-time fee of 10 grand and you're not paying 25 grand a year to some company that kind of has you in a corner with respect to this specific software application.
So I just want to bring up the Hustleberry and maybe you can explain what we're looking at here.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a business idea we had 5-6 years ago. I used to be in the video business, and this concept was coming up with a gig economy type site, like an Airbnb, but it was for people, places, and things. For talent, locations, and props for the creative industry, whether that's video, photography, events. Back in the day when we looked at this, the cost to develop this site probably would have been close to $500,000 to get it to a functional standpoint. So we shelved it. It wasn't viable at the time, so we shelved the idea. A couple of months ago, I talked to an old business partner of mine, sent him the business plan, explained what it is we were looking at, and he's now working with us and familiar with the AI space. Well, he went on and did some vibe coding and basically got this site up and running, and to an incredible, like, I was blown away. He was blown away. I think, Carl, you were even impressed with what we did with this site, and he did it in a matter of a couple of days. So this site is up. It's functioning. Now, there's still bugs. It's not 100%. We can't go live with it. But we've now got it to a point where 5 or 6 years ago, this probably would have been what we would have seen after spending, I don't know, maybe $100,000. And he was able to do it in a few days. And, so now, we're potentially going to be able to develop this site maybe for $50,000 rather than $500,000. So when you think about that, that's a massive shift. And again, the quality and the functionality that he's built to do it, these are just placeholder photos that Carl's showing, but these would potentially be, somebody's dog that you want to put up and make available for TV commercials, or your home, or your vehicle. If you're looking for a Lamborghini for a TV commercial, somebody might have a Lamborghini they put up here, and you can go in and basically rent it for a day like you would an Airbnb. So anyways, incredible example of vibe coding and what's capable. And I think that, again, Carl, and you know more about this, but where it's even going in the next, 6 to 12 months is pretty amazing what they're saying from all the AI labs.
I don't want to discourage people from vibe coding at all, right? Because I think there's so many opportunities, and the Dario Amodei and Kevin Wheel from OpenAI and Anthropic said that I think their belief is that 99% to 100% of coding will be done by AI by the end of the year. But you still need someone to review that code, and how that code is implemented, or the direction that it was started, you still need people to review that. And there's one person from OpenAI, his post was, it's not important that you learn to code, it's important that you can read code. And I think that's a very good point, because if you know how to read the code, then you know the direction that this AI can do, which means you can influence how it's built, the direction is. But if you don't know how it is, you're going to accept, just like any other, when you use large language models, you're going to accept that answer because you don't know any better, right? There isn't I guess, like, when you're asking it to code, like what would be your reference of knowledge that this is actually doing the right thing for you, outside of you looking, hey, it's functional, it works, so I'm going to deploy it.
But that's what business executives have been doing for years. I mean, I used to have programmers on staff, and I got to be honest, I had no idea whether they were good, bad. Like, I had no idea. They just said, well, this is the way it works. And I'd be going, okay, because I didn't know any different. And it was very, very frustrating. And that's why you ended up paying, huge sums of money to get good developers that you could trust. So I agree with you. If you can understand the code, I think that's pretty impressive. One thing that it actually just sparked my thought about, even with our idea with Hustleberry, is that the fact that coding is getting easier, the access is easier, is also going to cause other challenges for businesses, because I can create my site today and launch it. You can take a look at my site and come up with a better site a week from now. So when you think about a moat around your business opportunities, that'll be an interesting thing to see what happens in the future if you're creating a software application and going out as a business to sell it. Different than if you're actually, and also I guess in the same vein, if you're a business saying, I don't necessarily like the way this program operates, so we're going to develop our own internally and not pay that outside software development company for their annual fees that we find are ridiculous.
Well, I think this is the massive impact for businesses. Software itself is just like in another video, we talked about how some companies have super legacy type software, like 25, 30 years old. Well, if this thing gets good enough, they can technically code their way to a software program that just fits them. They're not looking to license it. They're not looking to go beyond their particular network, increase security, better data privacy for them, that fits their needs, that they won't need to spend any money. Then take it further. How about some of the software they already use? Because most software as a service, I think the big issue is how much customization can you do that fits within your business? So if you use a Salesforce, you have to have really good implementation, but just some implementations are like, it just doesn't fit what we're trying to do, and I want to do this thing, but it can't. But what happens when you now can either rebuild it, but more like, hey, can I build this kind of app that interacts with it a lot better? Then I don't need to have an implementation person to come in. So those are the things that I think that are now impacting, because businesses, once they realize that they can do this, can start kind of solving kind of their own problems without having to go outside.
And maybe that's where there's a business opportunity for a programming, for a development company, is rather than building 2 or 3 big huge custom computer programs, in the future they might be managing hundreds of custom applications for corporations that have all been built individually using vibe coding.
Yeah. There's one thing that I wanted to show, and if you do want to get into vibe coding, I thought this is a really neat tip. And if you know nothing about coding at all, this person, whether you use Cursor, Windsurf, or any tool like that, while you're quote unquote vibe coding, I love adding this phrase. If you know nothing, at the very least, you can learn while it's coding. So can you add explicit comments throughout this code to help me understand what it does and how to use these things like you were teaching a newbie? I thought that's an amazing idea because for those people, right, it is a completely different language. But if you have an explanation every single time that it's coding, you're learning at the same time, which I thought is to me, I was like, that's an amazing idea. And the ability to do this just levels everybody up.
And that just goes to that whole education point, and you saying being able to better understand the languages is going to help you in the long term.
For our audience, some things to think about, like what would it mean for your business if you could test new software ideas in 5 weeks instead of 5 months? And how much time and money would you spend? How much time and money do you spend managing development teams, meetings, and handoffs versus the time and money you'd spent maybe doing a little vibe coding? And could you actually build more useful internal tools if you cut some of that stuff out that you do now? Learn more about future AI business trends by watching these videos here. Enjoy today's episode. Want to learn how AI can impact your business? Then please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next episode.